Young, successful men, I would love to know what type of steps have you taken over the time to now be in that position?
I started to work my first job in a crypto startup in 2018, and interestingly enough, it went bankrupt.
It's fascinating. I mean, we are literally at a conference in Hong Kong with like thousands of people, and it's business as usual.
We are ready to support thousands of chains.
We'll get back to you.
The final day of consensus, we almost made it through this week, and it was an intense week. But we're sitting here on a beautiful rooftop right behind the Hong Kong skyline, an outside podcast. I hope it's not too cold. I really appreciate you, Marcin, to come on this podcast and having you and spending like a half an hour with us today.
Yeah, it's fantastic to be over here. Thank you for the invitation. It's a really nice and unique aspect of being outside. It's been an intense week. It's my first time in Hong Kong. One thing that surprised me a lot about Consensus specifically is that I met a lot of institutions, but also like crypto people. Many of the times when I go to conferences, it's more like one or the other. I truly can say I had like 50-50 meetings when it comes to DeFi protocols and people who are doing tokenized RWAs.
Was that kind of what you're looking for, or like, are you kind of happy with the outcome?
Yes, definitely happy. We as Redstone work with both the DeFi protocols and the institutions that look to expand into on-chain environments with tokenized treasury bills, private credit, reinsurance, and many other financial products. We position ourselves as experts in that particular area, and I got to know a lot of cool people over here as well.
Nice.
So I'm very, very happy.
I would like to kind of go a couple of steps back because, I mean, it's your birthday coming up. You're turning 29 years, if I can allowed to say that. And, you're young, successful men. I would love to know what type of steps have you taken over the time to now be in that position with Redstone, here in Hong Kong as one of the top guys in the company.
There is a long way ahead of us when it comes to Redstone, but naturally we are working super hard for everything that we deliver to our customers. So I personally started in crypto in late 2017. I wrote my bachelor thesis about blockchain and Ethereum, Bitcoin back in the days. That was ICO boom era. I started to work my first job in a crypto startup in 2018. And interestingly enough, it went bankrupt and I didn't get 3 months of salary. So that was a very harsh beginning in the industry. But, hard beginnings make you stronger. Then I had 2 startups that failed. So I learned a couple of mistakes that you should not repeat. Worked in Google Cloud for almost 2 years. And then in late 2020, together with Jacob and Alex, the other 2 co-founders of Redstone, we decided to disrupt the blockchain oracles ecosystem. Yeah, it's been going fantastic. We had 3 raises, pre-seed, seed, Series A, over 23 million raised from reputable investors. We protect right now over $8 billion of value on chain. Across more than 200 clients, and we are very much dedicated on expanding it further.
Very, very interesting. You kind of touched on a very interesting point, right? Because we obviously have a lot of founders tuning in as well. And, I think from, quote unquote, a failing company, you learn the most. And it probably taught you a couple of very interesting lessons. I would love to know maybe if there's like something you can share that like was a pivotal moment of like, okay, that is something you should absolutely not do, or something you really have to do. Maybe you can touch on that, a couple of points on this a little bit.
Yeah, I'll be honest, these are not revolutionary, but I'm going to say them even though they might sound obvious because I think they're tremendously important. So one of the 2 startups failed mainly because of the mismatch between the founders. I believe the idea was sound, but choosing a founder is like choosing a life partner. Yeah. If everything goes all right, you expect to work with that person shoulder to shoulder, hand by hand for many years. Not only you should be compatible in terms of the skill set, but also being able to go through the thick and thin. The first one, that was like the crux of the crash, let's say. Whereas the second one was killed by COVID. You remember.
It's hard.
That's actually pretty funny. Right now we are sitting in Hong Kong as if nothing happened a couple of years ago. But in 2020, for some people, it was like absolute nuke, the disaster, like end of the world. So then we were actually doing business in conference industry. conferences, and conferences absolutely shut down. Like it was minus 99% when it comes to the market. But it also has shown me that probably going for where you have unfair advantage, this is a very practical advice. Go and build where the market is big, but you also have unfair advantage. And at that time, I learned, okay, I got into crypto fairly early in 2017. I learned very good fundamentals and got to know early people in the Ethereum ecosystem. So I decided, okay, this is the place where I want to leverage something that I've built on very early on.
It's fascinating. I mean, we are literally at a conference in Hong Kong with like thousands of people, and it's business as usual.
Yeah.
Right, and a couple of years ago, it was unthinkable, and no one knew what's going to happen. Are we ever going to leave the house again? And all these different things, and obviously in some countries more than others.
Masks everywhere.
Masks everywhere, like the whole thing. But I think what you touched on is something very, very interesting because I mean, we run a venture fund, right? So we invest in a lot of early stage projects at that stage where you were, before you started raising Series A and kind of starting to get a business together. And it's not always the most complicated things why businesses fail. Right, it's not always like, oh yeah, our development team didn't work, or like we had this like crazy leak. It's most of the time at that stages, at least, it's fundamental things that are not working. Right, being founder fit, what you also mentioned. Right, I mean, you might get along with someone really, really well, but then as soon as you start a business and it becomes very difficult, then it might not be a good fit. Right, or what we also see a lot when we have portfolio companies is literally just finding product market fit, right? You have an idea in your mind. This is an amazing idea. This is a problem that I have, but maybe no one else really cares about it, right? And you don't get the paying customers. And I think what's impressive with you guys in Redstone is kind of like you have overcome a lot of these challenges, right? It's kind of like, I like to compare with an onion because it has all these different layers, right? And as soon as you grow, like you take one layer off, right? Like you have the founder fit. Okay, it seems to be working with you guys. So like that kind of risk is eliminated. Then you have paying clients. So like that kind of risk is eliminated, right? Obviously now you're facing different challenges probably all the time, but they're on a different level. And that obviously means that hopefully your chances of surviving is much higher. So if you can walk me through a little bit, like, okay, what got you guys to start Redstone? How was the early days, and how did that growth happen?
Yeah, like as I reflect on the past almost 5 years right now, it's been quite a journey. We started because Oracle space in 2021 was fairly dominated by Chainlink. And while they were providing essential service for the ecosystem, they couldn't keep up with the innovation. So Jacob, the technical founder, was actually building a protocol at the time that required interest rate information on chain and couldn't get it from Chainlink for a couple of months. So he started asking himself, okay, what is the actual reason for that slow pace of expansion? And it turned out it was the architecture. How Chainlink is structured is very monolithic. It was designed in 2017-18 when only Ethereum mattered and there were just a couple of like Ethereum killers. That was the very early days. Kuba, Jacob, decided to go for modular architecture that just allows for easier scalability. Right now, we are on over 110 chains, whereas Chainlink supports only above 20. And for us...
Big difference.
Yeah, we are ready to support thousands of chains, like without bigger hiccup, because this is like fundamental principles on which the product has been designed. So then in 2021 and 2022, actually product market fit was not so easy to find. A lot of people were telling us like, hey, we don't need like another Oracle, like maybe we cannot trust you because it's very early. So I found that in our industry, the biggest problem was the cold start. So you don't have customers, you need to find the first ones that are going to essentially like go with you on this journey.
Trust you, effectively.
Exactly, right? And then promote you with the other, to the new customers, create case studies and so on. For us, the inflection point, I remember, was finding two customers. The first one was Pendle and the second one was EtherFi. So both of them we found and started working with before they become, let's call them hot, like very popularized. And those kind of early bets pay off. And we are still on very good terms with both of them. I met EtherFi and Pendle over here as well.
Nice.
So it's been over already a couple of years. And as we kept progressing, we just were asking clients, hey, what is actually missing? Because there is this big threat for a crypto founder to have an idea in your head and then try to pursue it as strongly as you can without necessarily like listening to the feedback from the customer. And this is what we started to do a lot in 2023. And that was the aha moment. We were delivering new push feeds. We were going to new chains where they wanted us to expand. We were improving on the limitations that either competitors couldn't necessarily keep up with, and that allowed us to grow tremendously. And current days, in the past 6 months, this is interesting. We acquired 2 companies. One is called Credora, which is risk rating business. So similar to S&P or Moody's, we are able to provide a rating between D to A of a specific yield strategy. So imagine Syrup USDC from Maple Finance or USDE from Etina or a Vault on Morpho. Because it's also a trust business, so it's an adjacent business. And the second one, security token markets, allows us for very efficient expansion to the US. So once we saw in December the news about the DTCC and New York Stock Exchange going full on with tokenization, we were like, okay, 2026 is absolutely the year for institutions to go, and this is going to happen in America. Yeah. That's the reason we right now expand very aggressively within New York City and states in general.
And you mentioned the whole modular aspect of the platform, right? And I kind of bring that back to the first point you mentioned, where you said you have to start in a market that's big, right? Which it obviously is, and then you have to kind of find that unfair advantage. And would you say like that is part of the unfair advantage, like that a product is like systematically built different than most of the competitors out there?
Yes, that's definitely a huge advantage that pays off over time, over and over. So this was one of ours. The second is we tap into excellent engineers in Poland. So our whole tech team is located out of Poland. It's a growing country with fantastic engineers. And actually not many people know, but half of the developer team of MakerDAO when they were starting were actually Polish. There is a lot of Polish people in Ethereum Foundation, so they've been scattered across many other protocols, and we learned that we can tap into that talent as, like, let's say, the base layer of our company. Of course, we are international. We have people in the US, we have people in Europe, Asia, but the engineering talent is kept mainly over there. And the third extremely important aspect is we've been always listening to client and doing client-first integrations, whereas we hear more and more from the industry, for example, that Chainlink is focused a lot on their product. So instead of trying to solve the issue that the client is presenting, they are closing themselves in ivory tower and delivering what they think is going to support the market, which can also like work out if you hit the nail, but if you don't, then you end up with a product that no one necessarily wants to use.
I think that's a very critical point you just mentioned, right? And we see this with a lot of projects all the time, that they don't necessarily like try to get feedback, even if it's just one single customer or like the first 10, the first 5, right? It's kind of like we're building something and we're pressing it to the market. That's like a little bit how it feels sometimes, right? Because everybody's scared of like, oh, he's going to steal my idea, right? He's going to do this, X, Y, Z, which typically doesn't happen because there's millions of ideas, right? I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people that have your idea, but the execution matters. That's the most tricky part on building a company. It's executing the idea that you have in mind, that it actually functions and is revenue generating and profitable at some point. But maybe you can give a little bit of feedback, like how do you engage with these type of clients, especially early on? Was that through forums? You had connections with them? Like, what was your best way of like, okay, this is what they have in mind, this is what I have in mind, and how do I bridge that?
Me personally, and I believe our company in general, in the early days, conferences turned out to be extremely effective. So the mindset and type of people we hire in Redstone for the go-to-market team is being empathetic and listening to the client very much, and also being fairly easygoing. So hanging out with people, trying to understand like what they're saying, listening a lot. Like, of course, there's one aspect of promoting yourself, but the other trying to understand the crux of the problem. So asking deepening questions. This is always like very beneficial. Second thing is trying to be with them early on. As I mentioned, like with EtherFi and Pendle, like we saw fundamentally the platform that we were building was strong, and we believed it can grow. So doing some of those early bets and then staying very close is also extremely beneficial. So I would say that was one of the parts that played out very well.
Kind of like growing with your customers in an extent, right? Where It's not just like a client sort of relationship, but it's more just like, okay, like can we help you guys connecting, whatever it is that like you do in order to just not bring you up also, but bring your early clients up. And if they go big, then obviously it's great because you can say, we work with Pendle, right? We work with XYZ.
I think also
beneficial.
It's really great to identify a vertical in which you want to grow in terms of client base and identify one marquee client you really would like to collaborate with. That was our strategy with Securitize, for example, that chose Redstone as the primary and official Oracle provider for every tokenized asset they have. When they were looking for Oracle partner, we were presenting our infrastructure very transparently, and we were showcasing them the potential we have into the future. So this scalability of the model, going to new chains, supporting innovative clients, and it played very well for them because they wanted to grow, not just stay stagnant. And I have a funny story over here. When they already accepted Redstone as the main Oracle, we also had to get a get-go from their clients, for example, BlackRock. And the due diligence that BlackRock did on us back in the days was one of the most severe that I've ever experienced. You know, going through the code, architecture, asking us questions as founders, how is the team, what's the story behind us, what's the client references, because those bigger institutions extremely care about the reputation and who they work with. But once you manage to have one of those case studies, like a client that is of a high caliber, then you can very easily expand with others because they know the previous ones had to do a proper due diligence in order to close that kind of partnership.
And I think it's also a great way of just really understanding your company. No, I mean, I mean, we've done this a couple of times on a fund level when LPs, especially more institutionalized LPs that have very clear and strict requirements, but it also helped us as a fund improve, right? Because in case they point something out that could have been improved, that is better. So I think going in this direction of being properly due diligenced, so to say, is, a lot of people think this is a headache, but I also think at the same time it can be a huge benefit, right? And I think you only have to be afraid of this type of stuff if you're not what you say you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, because otherwise you should be able to deliver what is requested, and I think it's worth it to go through that, I would say, a little bit more maybe challenging, cumbersome process, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's a big brand.
True.
Right, and it helps both the client base, but also the reputation of the business. I kind of want to touch a little bit on your job in the company, what kind of you mostly focusing on, and then second, want to touch a little bit about where Redstone is heading. But first, a little bit about yourself.
The work as a founder is constantly changing, and you're responsible for different parts of the business as you grow. I think one of the most challenging aspects is hiring, for sure. And then the second is delegating things that you're afraid to delegate. But you're not going to scale if you're not going to pursue that path, right? You cannot micromanage everything all the time. To me, one of the key hires was our head of BD, Matt. He came in early in the days. He was the second non-technical hire. He was the first non-technical hire. I mean, I was the first non-technical person in the team. He was the first non-technical hire. And he has helped me a lot, to structure the whole business operations and processes. And right now, I'm very confident about his execution, how he's operating, and I sleep well thinking about our business development department. Another one was on the ops side. So as a founder, you shouldn't be occupied with operations too long, right? Because that's just going to burn your time. And as of today, I'm mainly focused on strategic partnerships. I can say I'm a people person. I like maintaining relationships with people, meeting them sometimes without even a very concrete agenda, and just trying to either support them, or listen to what they have on top of their mind, and then try to figure out a new product or maybe a new approach. Because in crypto, it's very easy to fall into this trap of being very transactional always. Of course, everyone wants to do business. We want to grow our companies. We want to find new customers, expand. But in my opinion, there should be just a good touch of conversations between founders to founders and projects to projects without even a very specific agenda. Yeah. That's the reason Consensus this year for me has been extremely amazing in that term.
Yeah, and I can see that, right? I mean, you're very easygoing. You're easy to talk to. I think that's what someone needs to have in a position like this, right? It's funny, just one thing before you go on, because a lot of founders come up, and it's probably the same thing for you. A lot of people chat with you, and it's sometimes you have this like immediate click, and sometimes it just feels extremely transactional, right? It's like when a founder comes to me, he's like, "Are you a VC? Oh yeah, by the way, we're raising." And they'll be like, "Okay, hello, what's your name? Where are you from?" Right? I mean, it's just like, and I think that's what I think is important also to assess for investors or like clients or whatever, because at the end of the day, this founder has to have many qualities, right? I mean, you're talking to investors, you're talking to clients, you're talking to strategic partners, you're talking to team members, and you're basically responsibility of hiring, which is all sales in a sense, right? You need to sell that person to come to your company, you need to sell the client to come to your company. And I think being able to like interact with people in a good way is extremely important, especially for non-technical founders.
Yeah, that's fully agree on that. So on one side, you have to keep those relationships internally, so within the team members and between each other, and then externally, like with some strategic partners. Over here, I met with Securitize, Euler, Pendle, EtherFi, and plenty of the other customers that we have, not even to expand on something that we discussed already, but just understand like where they're heading. It's early stage of 2026, like what are their strategic goals, plans, so that we can also plan our expansion accordingly. And one thing I can tell you, everyone is crazy about institutional adoption, which is like very much present on the conference, and we are very much ready as Redstone as well. And I'm truly excited. Look, I'm from Poland. I've learned about international finance more like from the university books, but I was not living in New York. I wasn't living and breathing that. But right now, as I learn by osmosis, it's extremely interesting. And how I perceive that is we live in a globalized world already. So we have the same food all over the world: pizza, sushi, kebab. We use
Everywhere.
the same platforms, Spotify, Netflix, WhatsApp. But on finance, we are so scattered. Like the financial rails in Hong Kong and Singapore different between each other, not to say about Poland and the US and South America. And blockchains finally can truly create this one layer that has no borders, works 24/7, and can create truly globalized financial system that keeps up with whatever else is out there. So language, right? Like we are all using English. This is also like part of globalization. So I'm truly excited that we can be part of this revolution, because I can imagine in 10, 15 years, maybe 20, we are going to talk to our children and they are going to ask like, "Hey dad, what's that?" And he's going to show you a coin. Or, "Hey dad, can you tell me how it was to wait 3 days for remittance between one continent and the other," right? Like as we are asking right now about, I don't know, some old pictures or...
No, it's definitely a very, very interesting time to be alive. And I think it's going to be a big transition. And you just mentioned, I mean, institutional time seems to be coming in now. And you guys are ready, and I think that's also where you guys are heading, right? Being able to service institutions, which requires a very different infrastructure, very different processes, and potentially also different talent on the team, right? That have this type of access and can service these type of clients. Yeah, I mean, like you guys are now at a very interesting point in the company, kind of getting in that real growth stage with the Series A. And by the way, congratulations on the raises that you guys have done. Any last words about consensus? Your time in Hong Kong, your birthday coming up, whatever you wanted to kind of give away to the audience?
We are extremely bullish on 2026. Actually, when many of the teams are cutting costs and trying to downsize, we are one that acquired 2 companies and hired more. We are very bullish on the industry in the long term, right? So we shouldn't be just blinded by this short period when market is not behaving like the best, right? We try not to think about it that much. This week, a new director of institutions for Redstone started in New York City. As I mentioned, our expansion in the US is going to have like a very large footprint. We want to keep growing in DeFi. So there is plenty of innovative DeFi startups that we started chatting early on again, and we want to be this design partner as they try to innovate. Second area are tokenized assets. Everyone wants to go into RWA tokenization. Now we try to identify who is serious about long-term implementation and meaningful use cases. Because one thing that you get is naturally global distribution, but the second that you should tap into is this programmability and utilization of asset in DeFi, so that you can introduce, for example, RWA looping and many other use cases that with tokenized deep yield products, you can actually access. And with Credora acquisition, that's also where we want to support users to define if there is a yield strategy that gives you 10% and is rated a B, and the other one that gives you 21 but is rated D, you are going to think twice before you are going to go into the higher yielding one, because we all saw what happened with Stream Finance. That basically, this is one thing I want listeners to understand, because I've heard on this conference, oh yes, Stream Finance was a very bad black swan event. And I tell that guy, it was not a black swan. Black swan is when you don't expect something to happen, or there's very little probability that something is going to happen. Stream Finance was a bad design from the very beginning. Very little transparency, playing on a leverage, hurt market perceived them, was a cracked kit that was like doing some yield strategies, which is essentially the opposite towards which we should strive as an on-chain finance and DeFi industry. And with Credora rating, we backtested, they would have gotten a C-, which would indicate for users, hey, this is a very high risk strategy. You can deploy there. I mean, right? Like everyone is free to do whatever they want, but it's just an information, like it is definitely not as safe as, for example, Stakehouse or Gauntlet or some other vault operators out there. So as we move in 2026 more towards institutions, we also want to introduce the same standard around the risk understanding and perception of the risk as many of the TradFi people in general.
So I just really want to congratulate you on all the previous raises that you had, and now with the token that's coming up, maybe you want to just say a very quick few words about where you guys are in the process right now.
Yeah, so actually we already launched the token. It's live on major exchanges like Binance, Upbit, Coinbase. It's been quite a ride. I bet you also talk with founders who are going through the process. Yeah. It is full of traps and interesting challenges, but we are very happy that the token is playing an integral part in the Redstone ecosystem. So the data providers have to stake the token in order to deliver the feeds in our ecosystem. And if they deliver fraudulent data, they're getting slashed. So it's very similar logic as proof of stake, you would say, which is very much proven on Ethereum, Solana, and many other blockchains. And we want to grow around tokens. So as you mentioned, we did the raises. We have a pretty good runway right now. We're looking ahead. But what's the most important for us is to create a business and an infrastructure that is going to help on-chain finance grow in decades ahead, not just like a couple of years. And one thing I can also tell to the listeners is in Oracle business, we are going to see a lot of consolidation. So many of the oracles that were too aggressive with spending and not too successful when it comes to expansion, we hear from the market will be closing or essentially doing some mergers and acquisitions. So more of that can come to the market.
I mean, this market, it's always like it is, you know. Some will remain, the strong ones, the one that did it intelligently, and some will unfortunately not. But there's always opportunities for players like Redstone that will stand out and will be excited to follow the journey.
Beautiful. And we are also very happy to work with all your portfolio companies.
We will definitely figure something out here. Just really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. Hope you enjoyed the view, and we'll get back to you.